Sabbath? Cap looked at me. Where you hear tell about a Sabbath? Then I told him some more about what had happened. I told him all the rest. He didn't say anything. Before long, he couldn't have answered me anyway, because of the thunder all around us, and the rain was lashing down on the buggy on the road, everywhere. It was pitch black outside now. The only time we could see was when the lightning flashed. I had to yell to make him hear me, yell about the things that caught Uncle Fred and come for Aunt Lucy, the things that took our cattle, and then sent Cousin Osborne back to fetch me. I hollered out about what I heard in the wood, too. In the lightning flashes, I could see Cap's face. He wasn't smiling or scowling. He just looked like he believed me. And I noticed that he had his pistol out again. He was holding the reins with one hand, even though we were racing along. And the horse was so scared he didn't need the whip to keep him running. The old buggy was lurching and bouncing, and the rain was whistling down in the wind. And it was all like an awful dream, but it was real. It was real when I hollered out to Cap Pritchett about the time in the woods. Shoggoth, I yelled. What's a shoggoth? Cap grabbed my arm, and then the lightning came down. I could see his face with his mouth open, but he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the road and what was ahead of us. The trees sort of come together, hanging over the next turn in the black that looked like as if they were alive, moving and bending and twisting to block our way. Lightning flickered up again, and I could see them plain, and also something else, something black in the road, something that wasn't a tree, something big and black, just squatting there, waiting with ropey arms, squirming and reaching. Shoggoth, Cap yelled. But I could scarcely hear him, and because the thunder was roaring, and now the horse let out a scream, and I felt the buggy jerk to one side, and the horse reared up, and we was almost to the black stuff. I could smell an awful smell, and Cap was pointing his pistol, and it went off with a bang. It was almost as loud as the thunder, and almost as loud as the sound we made when we hit the black thing. Then, everything happened at once. The thunder, the horse falling, the shot, and us hitting the buggy. And us hitting as the buggy went over. Cap must have had the reins wrapped around his arm, because when the horse fell, the buggy turned over, and they went right over the dashboard head first, and down in the squirming mess that was the horse. And the black thing that grabbed it, I felt myself falling in the dark, then landing in the mud and gravel of the road. There was thunder and screaming, and another sound which I heard only once before in the wood, droning like a voice. That's why I never looked back. That's why I didn't even think about being hurt when I landed. I just got up and started to run down the road as fast as I could, running down the road in the storm, and the dark with the trees squirming and twisting and shaking their heads. Well, they pointed at me with their branches and laughed. Over the thunder, I heard the horse scream, and I heard Cap scream, too, but I still didn't look back. The lightning winked on and off, and I ran through the trees now, because the road was nothing but mud that dragged me down and sucked at my legs. After a while, I began to scream too, but I couldn't even hear myself for thunder. And more than thunder, I heard drums. All at once, I busted clear of the woods and got to the hills. I ran up and the drumming got louder, and pretty soon I could see regular, not just when it was lightning, because there were fires burning on the hill, and the booming of the drums come from there. I got lost in the noise, the wind shrieking, and the trees laughing, and the drums pounding. But I stopped in time. I stopped when I saw the fires plain. Red and green fires, burning in all that rain. I saw a big white stone in the center of a cleared off space on top of the hill. The red and green fires was around and behind it. So everything stood out clear against the flames. Now what might encircling in red and green fire mean? They was men around the altar, men with long gray beards and wrinkled up faces, men throwing awful smelling stuff on the fires to make them blaze red and green. And they had knives in their hands, and I could hear them howling over the storm. And back, squatting on the ground, more men pounded on drums. Pretty soon, something else came up the hill. 2 men driving cattle. I could tell it was our cows they drove them right up to the altar, and then the men with the knives cut their throats for a sacrifice. All this I could see in lightning flashes and in the firelights. And I sort of scooched down so I couldn't get spotted by anyone. But pretty soon, I couldn't see very good anymore, on account of the way they threw stuff on the fire. It set up a real thick black smoke. When the smoke came up, the men began to chant and pray louder. I couldn't hear words, but the sounds was like what I heard back in the woods. I couldn't see too good, but I knew what was going to happen. 2 men who had led the cattle went back down the other side of the hill. And when they come up again, they had new sacrifices. The smoke kept me from seeing plain, but these was 2-legged sacrifices, not 4. I might have seen better at that. Now I hid my face when they dragged them up to the white altar and used the knives, and the fire and smoke that flared up, and the drums boomed, and all they chanted and called in a loud voice to something waiting over on the other side of the hill. The ground began to shake. It was storming. There was thunder and lightning and fire and smoke and chanting, and I was scared half out of my wits. But one thing I'll swear to, the ground began to shake. It shook and shivered, and they called out to something, and in a minute something came. It came crawling up the hillside to the altar and the sacrifice. It was the black thing of my dreams, that black, ropey, slimy, jelly tree thing out of the woods. It crawled up, and it flowed up on its hooves and mouths and snaky arms, and the men bowed and stood back, and then it got to the altar, where there was something squirming on top, squirming and screaming. The black thing sort of bent over the altar, and then I heard droning sounds over the screaming as it came down. I only watched a minute, but while I watched, the black thing began to swell and grow. There are certainly beings that feed off the evil that human beings do. That finished me. I didn't care anymore. I had to run. I got up and I ran and ran and ran, screaming at the top of my lungs, no matter who heard. I kept running and I kept screaming forever through the woods and the storm, away from that hill and that altar. Then all at once, I knew where I was, and I was back here at the farmhouse. Yes, that's what I'd done. Run in a circle and come back. But I couldn't go any further, and I couldn't stand the night and the storm. So I ran inside here. At first, after I locked the door, I just lay right down on the floor, all tuckered out from running and crying. But in a little while, I got up and hunted me some nails and a hammer and some of Uncle Fred's boards that weren't split into kindling. I nailed up the door first, and then boarded up all the windows, every last one of them. Guess I worked for hours, tired as I was. When it was all done, the storm died down and it got quiet enough for me to lie down on the couch and go to sleep. Woke up a couple hours ago, it was daylight. I could see it shining through the cracks. From the way the sun came in, I knew it was afternoon already. I'd slept through the whole morning, and nothing had come. I figured now maybe I could let myself out and make town on foot, like I planned yesterday, but I figured wrong. Before I got started taking out the nails, I heard him. It was Cousin Osborne, of course, the man who said he was Cousin Osborne, He come into the yard calling, "Willie," but I didn't answer. Then he tried the door, and then came the windows. I could hear him pounding and cussing. That was bad. But then he began mumbling, and that was worse, because it meant he wasn't out there alone. I sneaked a look through the crack, but he already went around to the back of the house, so I didn't see him or who was with him. Guess that's just as well, because if I'm right, I wouldn't want to see. Hearing is bad enough. Hearing that deep croaking, and then him talking, and then that croaking again, smelling that awful smell, like the green slime from the woods around the well. The well they went over to, the well and back. And I heard Cousin Osborne saying something about, "Wait until dark, we can use that well if you find the gate. Look for the gate." I know what that means now. The well must be a sort of entrance to the underground place. That's where those druid men live. And the black thing. They're out and back now, looking. I've been writing for quite a spell, and already the afternoon is going, peeking through the cracks. I can see it's getting dark again. That's when they'll come for me, when it's dark. They'll break down the doors or the windows and come and take me. They'll take me down into the well and the black places where the Shoggoths are. There must be a whole world down under the hills, and a world where they hide and wait to come out for more sacrifices, more blood. They don't want any humans around except for sacrifices. Well, the Jinn were here first, so some of them do generally avoid humans. I saw what the black thing did on the altar. I know what's going to happen now. Maybe they'll miss the real Cousin Osborne back home and send someone to find out what became of him. Maybe folks in town will miss Cap Pritchett and go on a search. Maybe they'll come here and find me. But if they don't come soon, it will be too late. That's why I wrote this. It's true across my heart, every word of it. If anyone finds this notebook where I hide it, come and look down the well, the old well out and back. Remember what I told about those ones. Block up the well and clean out the swamps. No sense looking for me if I'm not here. I wish I wasn't so scared. I'm not even scared so much for myself, but for other folks, the ones who might come after and live around here and have the same thing happen, or worse. You just got to believe me. Go to the woods if you don't. Go to the hill where they have the sacrifice. Maybe the stains are gone and the rain washed the footprints away. Maybe they got rid of the traces of the fire, but the altar stone must be there. And if it is, you'll know the truth. There should be some big round spots on that stone, round spots about 2 feet wide. I didn't tell about that at the last. I did look back. I looked back at the big black thing that was a Shoggoth. I looked back as it kept swelling and growing. I guess I told about how it could change shape, about how big it got, but you can't hardly imagine how big or what shape, and I still don't tell. All I say is look. Look and you'll see what's hiding under the earth in these hills, waiting to creep out and feast and kill some more. Wait, they're coming now. Getting twilight, and I can hear footsteps, and other sounds, voices, and other sounds. They're banging on the door, and sure enough, they must have a tree or plank to use for battering it down. The whole place is shaking. I can hear Cousin Osborne yelling. And that droning, the smell is awful, I'm getting sick, and in a minute, look at the altar. Then you'll understand what I'm trying to tell. Look at the big round marks, 2 feet wide on each side. That's where the big black thing grabbed hold. Look for the marks, and you'll know what I saw, what I'm afraid of, what's waiting to grab you unless you shut it up forever under the earth. Black marks, 2 feet wide, but they aren't just marks. What they really are is fingerprints. The door is busting. Oh.